We've all had that moment. Something he does hurts you, disappoints you, or crosses a line. Maybe it's subtle. He's running late again. He forgot something important. He casually dismisses your feelings or makes a joke that cuts a little too deep. And instead of saying what's actually going on inside you, you just smile and say, it's fine. You tell yourself you're being mature. You don't want to overreact. You want to keep the peace. You think, if I don't make a big deal out of it, he'll see how easygoing I am, and he'll appreciate that. But that's not what happens. What actually happens is something far more dangerous. The moment you say it's fine, when it isn't, you begin to chip away at your own emotional integrity. You're pretending. You're silencing yourself for the sake of preserving an image, a version of yourself that doesn't rock the boat. But here's the hard truth. When you do that, you're not preserving connection. You're training him to believe that your feelings are negotiable, that your boundaries are flexible, that your time, energy, and emotions can be dismissed without consequence. And if that happens enough times, he will stop showing up fully for you. He will stop being curious about how you really feel. And most dangerously of all, he'll stop being emotionally invested. Men don't fall in love with the version of you who says it's fine. They fall in love with the version of you who's honest, who shows up with grace and vulnerability. That woman, she commands attention without raising her voice. She doesn't have to throw ultimatums. She just has the courage to be real. And being real means sometimes saying, no, that didn't feel good. It means saying, I was disappointed you didn't call. It means letting the silence hang in the air after a hard truth, instead of rushing to fill it with comfort. You may fear that telling the truth will scare him away, but the reality is, the right man isn't scared by emotional honesty. He's drawn to it because it signals something rare. It shows him that you know your value, that you're not playing games or performing to win him over. You're standing in your truth, and that truth has power. When you constantly say it's fine, you create a dynamic where the other person doesn't feel the need to grow. He doesn't feel the need to reflect. He doesn't learn anything about what matters to you because you never give him the chance, and you start to feel more and more invisible. Not because he doesn't care, but because you're not showing up as someone who demands to be seen, not through aggression or drama, but through quiet strength. Think about how many times you've said it's fine when your heart was screaming the opposite. Think about how heavy that becomes over time. You may start to resent him, feel distant from him, or even lose interest entirely, because how can you feel close to someone who doesn't even know who you really are? And how can he fight for a connection that's been built on pretending? The shift begins when you start choosing truth over comfort. When you decide that your peace is more important than his temporary approval, that your standards are not optional, that it's okay to make someone slightly uncomfortable in the short term if it means honoring what's real. And that doesn't make you high maintenance. It makes you high value. There's a version of you who says, I'm not okay with that. A version who speaks up when something feels off. A version who knows that speaking your truth doesn't make you hard to love. It makes you impossible to forget. That version of you is magnetic. Because she's not afraid to lose someone who can't meet her where she is. She's not waiting for him to guess what's wrong. She gives him the gift of clarity. She makes it easy for the right man to love her, and hard for the wrong man to linger. And when you stop using phrases like it's fine, you create space for something deeper, real intimacy, real partnership, real conversations that build emotional safety, not emotional confusion. You start to speak in a way that invites connection instead of pushing it away, and you become the kind of woman who raises the standard, not just for how others treat you, but for how you treat yourself. You deserve to be in a connection where you don't have to constantly edit yourself. You deserve to express your feelings without fearing rejection. You deserve to say what you mean, and trust that it won't be used against you. But that starts with you. That starts with dropping the I'm fine mask, and being brave enough to show what's underneath, because that's where your power is. No one falls in love with perfection. They fall in love with the way you express your feelings, with your courage, with your humanity, with the way you speak when it matters. It's fine will never make someone obsessed with you, but your truth, your willingness to say what others are too afraid to say, that's what makes you unforgettable. That's what lingers in his mind when he's alone. That's what separates you from the rest. There's something magnetic about someone who can look you in the eye and speak the truth, not in a harsh, brutal way, but with calm conviction and emotional honesty. It's not about being dramatic. It's not about trying to be intense or emotionally overwhelmed. It's about having the courage to show up fully, to express what you feel, and to stop pretending everything is okay when it's not. That kind of emotional honesty creates a moment. It breaks through the noise of everyday interactions. It stands out in a world where most people are afraid to be real. When you meet someone who is emotionally honest, you remember them. Why? Because most people don't operate that way. Most people filter themselves. They downplay what they want. They hide how much they care. They pretend they're more casual than they are. And as a result, their conversations stay surface level. Their connections remain shallow. You walk away from them not really feeling anything, because they haven't shared anything worth feeling. But the moment someone says something real, something vulnerable, something true, it's like the whole world pauses, and that moment sticks with you. The same is true in dating and relationships. Emotional honesty is what makes you unforgettable. It's what makes someone obsess over you long after the conversation is over. When you speak from a place of truth, you're not trying to manipulate or convince. You're simply letting them see you, the real you, the version that doesn't pretend, doesn't play games, and doesn't water down their truth to avoid discomfort. And that kind of honesty carries weight. It creates emotional tension. It draws people closer because it invites them to feel something deeper than the usual small talk and fake niceties. There's a belief many people have that if you want to be attractive, you have to be mysterious, you have to hold back, you have to be cool and collected, and never show too much. But the truth is, real mystery isn't about withholding your emotions. It's about being selective with your acts. You can be emotionally honest and still have boundaries. You can share your feelings without over-explaining them. You can tell someone the truth about how you feel without demanding that they fix it. That's what gives your words impact. That's what makes someone lean in. Let's say he cancels a date last minute. You could pretend it doesn't bother you. You could say it's fine and act unbothered, hoping to appear chill and understanding. Or you could say, I was looking forward to seeing you, and it's disappointing that it didn't happen. I know things come up, but consistency matters to me. That sentence isn't aggressive. It's not needy, but it's powerful. It shows self-respect. It shows that your time has value. And most importantly, it gives him something to think about, something real, something that cuts through the autopilot of dating interactions. Emotional honesty works because it's rare. Most people are terrified to speak the truth. They're worried about being rejected, about coming across as too intense, about looking like they care too much. But the irony is, the very thing they're avoiding is the thing that would make them stand out. When you speak with emotional honesty, you become a mirror. You reflect not just who you are, but who they are in response to you. And if they're the right person, they'll feel safe to open up to. You create a space for real intimacy to happen, not just chemistry, not just attraction, but actual connection. One emotionally honest sentence can shift an entire relationship dynamic. It can take you from being someone he likes to someone he can't stop thinking about, because you're giving him something no one else is giving him. Clarity. You're not asking him to read your mind. You're not punishing him with passive aggression. You're simply saying, here's how I feel. And that level of communication is the foundation of every strong relation. Without it, all you have is guessing games. All you have is performance. And that never leads to real love. It leads to anxiety and detachment. When you express your truth clearly, calmly, and confidently, you do more than just communicate. You influence. You show him what kind of person you are. You show him that you don't avoid conflict. You approach it with maturity. You show him that being with you means being in a relationship where things don't get swept under the rug, where needs aren't minimized, where problems are addressed instead of ignored. That's what creates emotional safety. That's what makes someone feel like they can build something lasting with you. And here's the beautiful part. Emotional honesty doesn't just affect him, it changes you too. The more you speak from truth, the more empowered you feel, the more your confidence grows, the more you start attracting people who resonate with your authenticity instead of your performance. You stop overanalyzing what you should say and start focusing on what's real. And that alignment is magnetic. It draws in people who are emotionally available, who aren't afraid of depth, who value what you value. So many people are out there trying to be perfect, trying to say the right thing, look the right way, be the ideal version of themselves. But perfection doesn't make people fall in love. Presence does. Vulnerability does. truth does. The moment you choose emotional honesty over emotional convenience is the moment your life begins to attract people who can meet you where you are, not because you chased them but because you gave them something worth remembering. There's a quiet power in the way a woman holds her stand. It's not loud, it's not aggressive, it doesn't need to be. You feel it in the way she moves, the way she speaks, and most importantly, in the way she responds when someone fails to meet those standards. That's where self-worth lives, not in the words we say about ourselves, but in the actions we take when our values are tested. A woman with high self-worth doesn't need to say "I know my value." She shows it in the way she expects to be treated. She doesn't tolerate behavior that makes her feel small, unworthy, or invisible. And that unshakable energy, that's what captivates. When you set a standard, you're not trying to control someone else's behavior. You're not saying, "You have to do this or else." You're simply communicating, "This is how I live. This is what I require in a relationship. If you can meet that, amazing. If not, I'll walk away, and not with anger, but with peace." And that energy is magnetic. That calm certainty speaks louder than any demand ever could. It's the difference between chasing validation and attracting respect. Men aren't drawn to chaos. They're drawn to the woman who doesn't need them to be whole but chooses them when they rise to her level. Let's be honest, in dating, a lot of us compromise far too early. We excuse things we know don't sit right with us. We minimize what we want in order to seem easygoing. We go along with things that leave us feeling depleted or confused, all because we're afraid of seeming too much or too difficult. But here's the truth. When you abandon your standards, you don't become more lovable. You become forgettable. Why? Because now there's nothing that separates you from every other person who's too scared to speak up. You've blended into the crowd, and you've shown them that they can treat you any way they like, and still have access to you. Now think of a time when you saw someone raise the bar, not by being rude or demanding, but simply by saying, "That doesn't work for me." There's a deep, immediate respect that comes with that. You notice it, you pause, you reconsider your approach. That's the power of standards. It makes people step back and realize they're not dealing with someone they can take for granted, and if they care, if they value the connection, they adjust. That's what leadership in love looks like. That's influence. That's attraction on a whole different level.
When you have standards, you're not trying to be controlling. You're being clear. You're being honest. And honesty is sexy. Clarity is sexy. Knowing what you want and being unafraid to lose someone who doesn't align with it, that's magnetic, because most people don't have the courage to do that. Most people tolerate breadcrumb attention, inconsistent effort, and words that don't match actions. But when you don't, when you say "This isn't enough for me," you immediately stand out. You become someone they remember, someone they respect, someone they chase. Here's the irony. The very thing we fear, that setting standards will drive someone away, is actually what makes them stay, if they're the right one. You don't lose people when you raise your standards. You lose the ones who were never going to give you what you needed anyway. And that's not a loss. That's clarity. That's freedom. The right person isn't scared off by your standards. They're inspired by them. They see them as a challenge to rise to, not a burden to escape from. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, what you reinforce, and what you walk away from. If you stay silent when someone disrespects your time, you've just taught them that your time doesn't need to be respected. If you continue giving your energy to someone who only gives you attention when it's convenient for them, you've just told them that inconsistent effort is good enough for you. And if you lower your standards to hold on to someone, you haven't secured love, you've secured performance. And the cost is your peace, your confidence, and your worth. But when you live by your standards, even when it's uncomfortable, you operate from a place of integrity. You send a message to yourself that says, "I trust myself, I believe I'm worthy, I believe that what I want exists, and I'm not afraid to wait for it." That mindset changes everything. You stop begging for breadcrumbs, you stop settling for almosts. You stop holding on to people who don't hold on to you, and you start attracting partners who match your energy, who meet your effort, and who respect your values without needing to be convinced. There will always be people who try to test your standards, people who want access to you without the effort, People who say all the right things but fall short when it comes to follow through. Your job is not to fix them, your job is to observe, to pay attention, to protect your energy. To ask yourself, is this aligned with what I say I want? And if the answer is no, your next step is to walk. Not because they're bad, but because you're clear. The more you do this, the stronger your self-worth becomes, because it's built through action, through choices, through the moments where it would be easier to settle, but you choose not to. And that consistency in your behavior, that loyalty to your own values is what builds real confidence. Not the kind of confidence that's loud and performative, but the kind that's rooted, quiet, certain, undeniable. You don't have to prove your worth to anyone. You don't have to convince someone to want you. You don't have to chase. You simply have to remember who you are, what you bring to the table, and what kind of relationship you're building. And when you hold yourself to that standard, others will either rise or walk away. Either way, you win. So many people walk around thinking that the key to being loved is being nice. We're taught early on to be agreeable, easygoing, accommodating, and polite, even when we're uncomfortable, even when something feels off, even when we're not getting what we want. But what if I told you that nice is often the very thing that blocks the connection you're craving? Not because there's anything wrong with kindness, but because when we equate being nice with avoiding honesty, we end up betraying ourselves. And nobody falls in love with someone who constantly abandons themselves to keep the peace. There's a massive difference between being kind and being unclear. When you're kind, you can still express a boundary. You can still say no. You can still call something out that doesn't feel good. That's real kindness, because it includes truth. But when you're unclear, when you say yes just to avoid discomfort, or you laugh off things that bother you, or you pretend you're fine when you're not, what you're actually doing is building a relationship on shaky ground, and that kind of relationship never lasts. Worse, it doesn't even deepen. It just floats on the surface based on assumptions and avoidance. Men don't connect with vague, uncertain energy. They don't obsess over women who are always agreeable, always smiling, always saying, it's okay when it's not. They connect with women who are clear about what they like, what they don't, what they want more of, what they won't tolerate. Clarity is compelling. It says, I know myself, and that is one of the most attractive things you can communicate, not through perfection, but through honesty. Clarity doesn't mean being harsh or critical. It doesn't mean demanding or micromanaging. It simply means being honest about your reality. Saying when you cancel last minute, it makes me feel unimportant, or I need consistency to feel safe in a relationship, or that joke didn't sit right with me. Can we talk about it? Those aren't attacks, they're invitations to understand you better, they're opportunities for connection, and when said calmly and confidently, they invite the other person to step closer, not pull away. But here's where the fear comes in. So many people are afraid that if they're too honest, they'll scare someone off, so they hold back, they filter, they downplay, and in doing so they shrink, they become a watered-down version of themselves, the version that never rocks the boat. The version that's always chill, the version that says it's fine even when it's not. And guess what happens? That version gets overlooked. That version gets taken for granted. That version becomes invisible. The irony is, the more you try to be low maintenance, the more you lose your power, because being low maintenance often comes at the cost of your needs, your voice, and your truth. And that's not attractive, that's exhausting. No one falls in love with someone who disappears into what they think the other person wants. They fall in love with someone who shows up fully, with edges, with opinions, with preferences, with the courage to speak their mind even if it might create tension, because they care enough to be real. Think about this. The conversations that feel risky are the ones that build intimacy. When you tell someone how you really feel, you give them a chance to see the real you, and to meet you there. You give them the opportunity to reassure you, to clarify, to adjust, to grow. That's the stuff relationships are built on, not the constant pretending that everything is fine, or the endless overcompensating to avoid confrontation. The woman who is clear doesn't wait until resentment builds to speak up. She doesn't punish in silence. She doesn't withdraw or manipulate. She simply communicates. She says what's true for her, not to control the outcome, but because she knows anything built on silence is temporary. She doesn't use her words as weapons, she uses them as bridges, to create understanding, to build trust, to protect her peace. And when a man feels that energy, he doesn't feel pressure, he feels grounded, he knows where he stands, he knows what she values, and if he's worth her time, he steps up. It's not about being difficult, it's not about being dramatic, it's about being authentic. And in a world where so many people are pretending, authenticity is electric. It wakes people up, it holds their attention, it makes them think, there's something different about her, not because she's perfect, but because she's real, because she's brave enough to show up as herself, even if it means not being liked by everyone. The next time you're tempted to be nice, instead of clear, ask yourself, am I protecting the connection, or am I protecting my fear of being uncomfortable? Because if you keep avoiding the truth to make someone else comfortable, you'll eventually end up in a relationship that feels like a performance instead of a partnership. And that's not love, that's a role you're playing, and you deserve more than that. Most people think attraction is built through charm, good looks, or saying the right thing at the right time, but the truth is, lasting attraction, the kind that stays in someone's mind long after you're gone, comes from something much deeper. It comes from emotional depth. And emotional depth isn't created by playing it safe, it's created when you have the courage to speak your truth. That's what sets you apart in a world where everyone's trying to be liked, instead of being real. You might not realize it, but the moments that leave the deepest impression on someone aren't the ones where you agreed with everything they said or laughed at all their jokes. The moments that linger in their mind are the ones where you showed them your heart, where you said something vulnerable, where you expressed an unpopular opinion, where you stood up for yourself. That's what makes someone think about you when you're not around. That's what creates emotional gravity. Too often we filter ourselves, because we're afraid of scaring someone off. We stay quiet when something bothers us. We smile when we feel disappointed. We go along with things just to avoid tension, and we think that's how to keep someone close. But that's not closeness, that's performance. And a relationship built on performance doesn't create obsession, it creates exhaustion. You end up feeling unseen, unheard, and unfulfilled, because you never actually showed up as yourself. You showed up as a version you thought they'd like, and deep down you know that if they love that version, it's not really you they're loving. Real confidence comes from being unapologetically yourself, even when that means things might get uncomfortable. Speaking your truth doesn't mean being confrontational, it means being authentic. If something hurts you, say it. If you're confused, ask the question. If you need clarity, seek it. That level of honesty is rare, and rarity is magnetic. It stands out. It makes people sit up and pay attention, because most of the world is too scared to be that real. Imagine someone says something that crosses a line, even slightly. You have two options: laugh it off and keep the peace, or take a deep breath and say, hey, I know you probably didn't mean anything by that, but it didn't land well with me. Which one makes more of an impact? Which one teaches them about who you are and how to treat you? Which one invites respect and curiosity, instead of silence and assumption? When you express what's true for you, not with anger, but with honesty, you show strength, you show standards, you show that you're not desperate for approval, and that's incredibly attractive. The people who are worth your time will lean in, they'll listen, they'll be intrigued, they'll feel safe enough to share their truth too, and suddenly the connection isn't surface level anymore. It's real, it's layered, it's memorable. Some people will tell you, don't be too intense, don't be too much, don't speak up, or you'll drive him away. But here's the truth. Anyone who is scared off by your honesty was never capable of meeting you at your level. You're not scaring them off. You're revealing who's not meant to stay, and that's a gift. It saves you time. It protects your energy. It clears space for the kind of connection that actually nourishes you. The irony is, the moment you stop trying to be what someone wants, and start being who you are, that's when everything changes. That's when you become unforgettable, because you're not giving them a version of yourself they've seen 100 times. You're giving them something real, something they can feel, something they can trust, because when you speak your truth, you communicate emotional safety, and emotional safety is what creates real intimacy. So when you catch yourself holding back, trying to play it cool, or pretending not to care, pause. Ask yourself, am I building something real, or am I just avoiding risk? Because speaking your truth may feel risky in the moment, but the real risk is in staying silent. That's how you slowly disappear from your own life. That's how you wake up one day next to someone who doesn't really know you, and worse, someone who doesn't really value you, because you never showed them your depth. You don't need to raise your voice to raise your standards. You just need to stop hiding what's true for you, whether that's what you want, what you fear, what hurts you, or what lights you up. Let it be seen. That's how real attraction grows, not from perfection, but from truth, not from playing a part, but from being whole. Let me know when you'd like the final conclusion of the full speech, or if you need Urdu translation of one. You stop hiding behind politeness. When you stop saying what sounds good, and start saying what's real, everything changes. That's when he starts to pay attention, not just to your words, but to you. That's when you become unforgettable, not because you tried harder, but because you became braver. Braver in your voice, braver in your honesty, braver in your standards. You don't need to be louder, or prettier, or more agreeable. You just need to be more you, because the woman who owns her truth doesn't chase love, she inspires it. And once a man sees that, he won't stop thinking about her.